Farm IQ itself, now is this going to go there? Yep. It's actually a PGP program. So it's Sulphurn Farms and Land Corp and TrueTest and MPI got together 6 years ago now and put together a bigger program which is all about creating more money out of the red meat value chain basically. And so the Farm IQ, the system itself is just only one piece of that overall value chain. It's kind of the glue that holds the value chain together. But overall it's about keeping customers very happy about the eating quality, the eating outcomes in a restaurant, linking that back through retail or the chef, back to a chiller, back to information on a farm, and back to the paddock. And so that's that value chain that we're really trying to hang together with software. You hear a few comments about the fact, will farmers pay for software or broadband connections? And if they do, why don't they just get it out of the price of meat? And I think the economic realities of farmers actually passing costs back up a chain somewhere so that actually when you're consuming your steak in Auckland, you actually are paying for the farmer's broadband connection is not really going to economically work all that well. And so somehow we need to find other ways of funding some of the stuff so farmers obviously bear a share of the costs, but actually trying to push it all down in the first instance to the farming of things is, it just won't work all that well. We talk a lot about data, and data's great, but and I wasn't the one that came up with this theory, but if you think about data, information, knowledge and wisdom, it's the wisdom that pays, not the data. And so if you think about it in a farming context, data is just some weights of some animals. Information might be monthly weight gain. Knowledge, are you going to hit the target that you might have had in the last point? What the hang do I do if I'm not? Or if I'm way ahead, what do I do? And so it's not really those, the four bottom points there that actually drive the business. It's, you want to minimise the cost of that. It's actually maximising the value out of that wisdom that really counts. You all know probably the average age of farmers in New Zealand is 60 plus, well, at least 60. And they carry a lot of wisdom in their heads, like a heap of it, but the whole heap of them are going to retire very soon. And unless we can actually get the information ecosystem to run really well so we can transfer some of that information or transfer that knowledge base off the farm so you can just pick up information as you go, it's actually going to make that whole transition damn hard. So, as I say, the focus here is, what do you do with the system to get the wisdom out of them, not just getting data in there. And I suppose if you look at business planning, it's a continual cycle. What's my wisdom, more data, more information, more knowledge, and round that loop, like plan, do, check, act, like Deming came up with, God knows, in the 60s. So it's that's actually, I think, what underpins all of this stuff in the end. As far as farmers, I talk about the value chain, farmers, process to consumer, but actually if you're farming, there's a whole heap of people around you. And all those people in one way of, want to know what you're up to, you need to know what they're up to. And so it's not just about connecting the value chain, it's actually pulling that whole ecosystem together. And all those blue lines, and even the red ones for that matter, are actually all broadband connections in the end. And if you don't have them, then all those lines get broken up and they don't become real time and they just become a bit of a mess. If you then go on and see, well, there's a ecosystem they're working in, then there's a whole lot of software out there that does various things as well. So when we put Farm IQ together, we didn't want to reinvent FarmX, which is a feed budget. We didn't want to reinvent Figured or Cash Manager or a software for financial systems. We didn't want to reinvent Overseer for nutrient budgeting or NATE for animal traceability. So we built a system that filled in that donut effectively and pulled it all together so that you created a software ecosystem. And it just so happens, not surprisingly, that in doing so, you also sort of start joining that ecosystem around the outside together. So the farm consultants, most of them use FarmX. The accountants and banks use financial software. So it's pulling with software, I suppose, pulling that whole thing into one group. And if you think about it on farm, most farmers in the end have been using yellow or orange or blue boxes for quite some time, and they're weigh scales essentially. So that's kind of the primary point of data collection on most sheep and beef farms anyway. If you're a dairy farmer, it's really what's in the vat. So when we set out, there was all these boxes connected to a PC, a standalone PC, and nothing could really talk all that sensibly. And so we thought, well, if you chuck the whole thing in the cloud, that would be a good thing. Chucking things in the cloud, what do you need? Decent broadband connections. And so now we actually use mobile phones for pulling data off scale heads, and that chucks it up into the cloud if you haven't got a connection. We use mobile phones for recording pasture covers, rainfall, animal movements, animal health treatments. Pretty much anything you're doing in a paddock, you can do in a mobile phone. But the point with that is it's all very well for collecting information, but if you want to do some analysis in the paddock, if you haven't got a real-time connection, it's quite tricky, and I'll come to that. It would be great if those scale heads had broadband connections and they just talk to the system. So like we expect every time you open your phone, does it connect to Microsoft? Do you get your emails here and in your laptop and everywhere else? Yep, normal stuff. It would be great in the rural community and farming if you could do exactly the same thing with your farm data collection. And that's just touching the surface. There's weather stations, spreading systems, irrigation systems, you probably heard this morning, today, a whole lot of other stuff that's going on farm, Internet of Things effectively, that needs to be able to get back into a core system for people to do their day jobs, not just farmers, but all those people around them as well. Where it's going to go next, I think, and we were having a conversation just before afternoon tea at our table, is beyond data and information, it's into wisdom. And so if we've got the farmer and he's not 60, but he's probably more like mid-30s, but a lot of these younger guys aren't going to know what's causing the bare patches in that pasture, or what those grubs are in the soil, or what the hell that weed might be, although in actual fact it's probably clover. So we're going to have to get to the point where someone wandering along their paddock can actually pull up the phone, take a video or video something live, and actually talk to someone back in an office somewhere that actually understands what's going on, saves them remembering all that sort of stuff, and brings in hundreds of years of wisdom in one go, rather than the farmer having to carry it in his head. And I was talking to an agronomist this morning who does exactly that. The cost of him running 5 field reps around most of the Waikato was massive, and he was saying if he could actually have, and Waikato is probably not a good example because broadband's not too bad, but if he could actually have the farmer actually showing him what's going on and have a couple of people sitting in the office, that would take 3 people out of the business just spending most of their time driving around in a car. And, 3 farmers in one day, it's not economically efficient. So if you think there's some opportunities for pulling costs out of farming, there's some huge ones if you think about how farmers interact with that service sector around them. And on to my next point, I suppose, if you've got on-farm, you know what's going on because you've got a better handle because you've got more information at your fingertips, then you can start doing some analysis. Why is it this way? What can I do to make my business go faster? And again, all that in the end gets hooked together with rural broadband. I'm not the only one saying these sort of things. This is ANZ last year did some research on farmers, and that was, you've probably seen it before, their conclusions. Why do farmers want to use mobile technology, which requires, broadband, improved decision making, easier to work anywhere, monitoring of risks, improved productivity. So those are all things that are driving farmers' decisions on farm. And again, ANZ, they're saying, how would this work? Well, we stick it in the cloud, an integrated information system that lives in the cloud. And to do that, rurally, requires decent broadband connections. Going a bit further, I didn't know these guys until I came across the report, but United Nations and various others, Global Opportunity Report 2016, the number one opportunity they identified worldwide ahead of closing skills gaps and reducing food waste was smart farming. Smart farming doesn't happen without good broadband going forward. And farmers' most valuable tool, same report, the phone. How do I get at my information about what's going on in the world? Phone, what's that require? It requires an internet connection, essentially, not a phone connection, an internet connection. And what's the key point of all this? Growing more with less. We've got to feed a planet. And New Zealand's a bit different. We're trying to feed 25 million people and make money out of it. But in the end, the whole world, whether it be climate change or anything else, is growing more with less with more broadband. Again, this is not me. This came from a conference the other week. It came from the European equipment manufacturers, actually. But this is Porter of Harvard saying exactly the same stuff. So it's not as though what we're talking about here is in isolation from the rest of the planet. This is John Deere saying they had a tractor, they made the tractor connected. They then connected the tractor to some other blooming sensors. They can monitor, the John Deere tractor. You can sit in Iowa and work out what fuel it's using and where it's going. And it can turn itself around into a paddock for that matter. But it's the last point on this is saying, what's all those other systems that need to be connected, and that all requires a broadband connection. I know this is getting boring, but that's the point. In terms of farm management system, just briefly, from the Farm IQ perspective, it all lives on a map. We sat down with a whole lot of farmers, worked out what they wanted. So there's obviously land-based element to it. Use planning tools so you can run diaries in it and task management for staff. Gross margin calculators for working out what sort of margin you might make on beef or lamb or other bits and pieces. Reporting on live weight gain and benchmarking. And again, there's another great point about putting things in the cloud. The blue wiggly lines running through that is actually the regional average for that area on live weight gains. And so if you've got information in the cloud, you can actually benchmark it real time. And so if you're a farmer, you can understand how you're going compared to your mates in the valley or that region or other peer groups. And so, if you're trying to get someone to go forward, actually understanding where they stand in the pack is usually pretty important. Land-based activities, pretty much crops, fertiliser, effluent, chemical applications, pasture covers, so anything you can chuck on a map. Getting stuff back out the other way, and this is just a real snapshot of a few things. What sort of stocking rate or how many animals can your paddocks cover? So that's a report for the last 12 months for that farm saying this paddock didn't do very much and the dark blue ones did a whole lot. So that's integrating land and animal information all into one to understand exactly the efficiency of your business. excuse me, if you're thinking about it from a meat productivity perspective or meat quality perspective, as part of Sylvan Farms beef program, got an eating quality program. And so the farmers know where they passed or failed, and if they pass, they get another 25 cents a kilogram. But down the left-hand column here, you can see a whole lot of other factors, and that's all the right-hand side is all the stuff that gets measured in the processing plant, minus a few things. And down the left-hand side here is all the factors that are driving those outcomes on the farm. And so you can play around and understand what you did on your farm to get a better outcome on the right-hand side. And that's just a tip of an iceberg in terms of what you could do if you really got it together. But that's pulling, off-farm information together with on-farm information, and the more you could do that in real time, the better chance you've got of a better outcome. And if you're trying to do it in the yards down the back of the farm and understand which animals you should send or you shouldn't, it's pretty hard to do unless you've actually got an internet connection. Quality assurance side of things, farm diaries, what have you treated these animals with? Are they antibiotic free? Whatever else that the consumer might be asking you to do these days, which is quite a raft of stuff. More recently, we've done stuff around health and safety, so hazards on a map, that side of things, because there's a whole lot of compliance coming. And even more recently than that, we've been doing land and environment planning, because not only are farmers faced with what the consumer's pushing at them, they're also faced with a whole lot of regulatory pressure coming at them. Recently, 4th of April, health and safety. And again, with the rural broadband sort of spin on it, you need to know who's coming on and off your farm these days for a health and safety perspective. And so we've got a phone app which says who's on and off the farm, but if you haven't got a broadband connection when the guy goes on the farm, it's hard to know whether what he's doing. It's going to be delayed. And I heard the Plunkett person was talking about having to load things up before you go. Well, you can do, but the weather's the weather and various other things happen, and you might not do in your day what you thought you were going to do. So having access to this stuff, regardless where you happen to end up, would be truly spectacular. Land and environment covered that. We've chopped the system into bits, even though it's all the same system, so farmers can kind of get their head around using it for different purposes. And we now provide systems for vets, farm consultants, we've also got rural retailers, agronomists, so not only are farmers using it, so is everybody else around them. And lastly, my wish list, surprise, surprise. Broadband where you need it is probably a better way of putting it. Ubiquitous would be too damn expensive. But broadband where you need it to do what you need to do your job. And so rather than just moving data around, it's, accessing wisdom these days. Anywhere you might need to access the wisdom. Going back to that point about a video and accessing someone else's knowledge. We talk a lot about the Internet of Things, and that requires an internet connection as well, or data connections. But from a farmer's perspective, if measurement was really straightforward and collection easy, that would be truly fantastic, all underpinned by broadband. Rugged devices, something else I think farmers need. Things end up in troughs or under tractor wheels and things. And that actually doesn't really matter if all your data's in the cloud. Throw the junk phone, get another one, sync it up and go. But if you haven't got it all in the cloud and your phone gets munched, not a good day. Complementary operating systems. We deal with Apple, we deal with Google, we deal with all sorts of bits and pieces. And I think someone was talking today, how do we get more of these people to cooperate a bit more? It's a competitive world out there, but actually making these things talk more nicely would be great, because it saves a lot of time and effort for a lot of people, including farmers. And last, I suppose, and it's not really quite related to broadband, but if you're a farmer, you really want to have a human interface. The fact that you've got a big fingers and you go and type on a keyboard is just nuts, right? You really need a telephone what you wanted to do. And Siri, God bless his soul, doesn't work so well with no internet connection, for example. So I guess it does actually have a human aspect, internet connection aspect to it in the end. So that was my my wish list from a while ago. And I looked at it the other day when I was doing this and thought, has it changed a whole lot? No, it really hasn't changed in a couple of years. To be fair, it's moved on a fair way, but fundamentally that's really what's required, I guess, in the broader sense to make all this work. And that should be me. Thank you.